I don't know if y'all can hear me, but I am. This is a intro. What's the word I'm looking for? I have placed this in the place of an intro. So once I get my act together, this will in fact be my intro. Well, a video. Wow, I am just not here today. Yeah, something else will be playing here. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm doing a run of show with OBS, and I want to see how well I transition between intro to content to outro and that sort of thing. So yes, Clive, yay! You can hear me. How is the audio? High, low, echoey? Because it sounds low and echoey to me. Howdy. Audio is good. Awesome. No echo. Oh my god. I think I may actually succeed at coming back to OBS without too many technical issues. Knock on wood. All right. Well, like I said, I'm about 5-6 minutes early. There's some background noise. I'm not surprised by that. How about now? One of the things that I will kind of need to get, the two things that I want to get in terms of my setup here is a boom mic, a boom arm for this, because I found that since it's on the table, any slight hit of the desk will come through. And yeah, hold on, I'm echoing because I'm I have the monitor on, and I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so great. Yeah, where was I? So I think two things that I want to get for my YouTube setup are an arm to hold the mic up here, because again, if I type or if I hit something on the desk, I think it comes through pretty easily. And the other is a uniform light screen to place over here, because my lighting is always very, very bad. I took my earphones out, took the monitor out. So again, if the audio has changed, please let me know, and I will go back to what I had before. But the hearing myself in my ears was driving me a little nuts, because there's just enough of an offset to make things odd. Anyway, so yeah. Again, I'm going a little early, but why not? I'll just get into it. Oh, my hair. I don't know how warm it is where y'all are, but I'm sweating more than a long-legged cat in a rocking chair factory. Anyway, so howdy, I am Professor Parks, PhD, and I make content on astronomy, science skepticism, and mental health. Today I'm going live for two reasons. One, as I've kind of been rambling on about, I'm transitioning from StreamYards over to OBS. It'll save me some money, and it'll give me yet another toy to play with. So hopefully things are going well in terms of audio and visual out there in the YouTube land. So far, it seems so good. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is I didn't want to just have a stream where I tested various settings on OBS. Kind of boring. So I wanted to talk about something that was brought to my attention by a friend of mine, Eric. He has been pretty engaged with the Aether Cosmology folks on their Discord, Alan and Toby, or Space Audits and Toby. And one of the things that he sent me recently, Eric did, was he sent me a link to a Space Audits video recently on stellar aberration and stellar parallax, which admittedly I haven't had the time to watch. Things have not been great over the last weekend or so I'm just now getting back on my feet again. But I have not watched it. But he did, along with that, he sent a link to a book, which I will introduce in a moment, and said that audits quoted that to some certain extent. And so at the time, I was up enough that I actually looked through the text, particularly the chapter 41, Enigmas Solved by the TYCHOS, and I figured, I will endeavor to make a video series about these 41 enigmas by TYCHOS. With that being said, what I'll do today is I will go through them live. In a way, I've already kind of gone through them, but I'll go through them live and give my initial thoughts as I did on Discord to Eric. And I will leave the deeper dive to these and the model itself to edited or scripted videos later on. I think that would be a good test of... I've been... With my YouTube channel, I've been kind of all over the place in terms of what I want to do with it and what types of videos I want to make. And so I think this gives me something to gnash my teeth on or bite into, see how I like it, and go forward from there and see how that is. What I found is if I want to learn any kind of system, it's best by doing rather than by just coming up with things on the fly. It's always good to have a problem to solve with a system than just to come up with something whole cloth to deal with. Alrighty then. So, TYCHOS. Let's go to that one. Actually, I apologize. I'm going to have to turn this fan on because... yeah, it's hot in here. If you are in any way familiar with academia, you will know that the buildings on a university campus are never quite the right temperature, and you have no control, or very little control. If you're lucky, you might have access to an area thermostat. If you are ridiculously lucky and actually have a thermostat in your office, yeah, you suck. I hate you with a burning passion. Because the rest of us have to suffer. Either we have to suffer with what they set the entire building to, what temperature, cold or hot. Anyway. Again, I haven't seen the chat move in a while, so I want to make sure that's going on. I haven't... I'm looking at the chat through OBS, not through YouTube, so... Oh, speaking of which... thank you, Judy Bassett, for the super chat of 15 euros. 10 for me, 5 for you two. Thank you very much for that, because I think now, with that, I have crossed the $100 threshold, and I can actually get paid from YouTube. Woo! Yay! Yay me. All right. So, oh, good. All right, Judy, thank you. Again, thank you for the super chat. Now, TYCHOS. Well, first off, let me come over here and give you tell you what the book is entitled. I want to oh, no, that's not what I wanted. I want to do that. La 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 la. This book was written by Simon Shack in 2023, sorry. I don't know who Simon Shack is. I don't know what they do for a living. I know nothing about Mr. Shack or Dr. Shack or whoever. The book is entitled The TYCHOS, Our Geoaxial Binary System. And for reasons that I still don't quite understand, the icon that he has chosen, or they have chosen, is a snail. And there is an old Italian adage, which I don't speak Italian, so I don't know what it says. Piano, I believe, is something related to small, so maybe small changes will lead to big ones. I don't know. Anyway. Again, full disclosure. I know I have only skimmed what this model actually is, and I think I'm buffering. So I've really only looked into Chapter 41, which is Enigmas by the TYCHOS. Enigmas solved by the TYCHOS. Now down here we seem to have a model of the TYCHOS system, and what it seems to me to be is on the face of it, your typical neo-Tychonic model. Now, when I say typical neo-Tychonic model, I think I've been maybe taking something for granted, which I won't spoil right now. But on the surface of it, what we have is a model first proposed by Tycho Brahe back in I think it was the early, mid-1500s, late 1500s, somewhere in there, around the Tycho, Kepler, Galileo time frame. So late 1500s, early 1600s. And just a little bit of history. I loves me some Tycho Brahe, and I know I'm mispronouncing his name. A native speaker, corrected me. I think it's actually pronounced TYCHOS, but I could be very wrong. I am just going to default to my American pronunciation of Tycho. Now, Tycho, as I tell my students, is the Tyrion Lannister of astronomy. Independently wealthy, loved to party, and got his nose chopped off. He was, and perhaps still is, the preeminent visible astronomer, or visible astronomer. By that, what I mean is the precision of his visible observations. We're talking about naked eye. Who goes slow and steady wins? Oh, okay. So, Rabbit and the bunny. Fable. Howdy, yes. Thank you for being here. So as the story goes, Tycho Brahe the precision of his observations were unprecedented at the time, and as far as I know, have never really been surpassed. And what I mean by visual observations is this predated the telescope, so this was definitely before 1609. What he used was a meridian instrument, and incidentally, I haven't confirmed this, but if you ever wondered why telescopes are located in canonical domes, from my understanding, Tycho was the first one to actually build one of these for an astronomical purpose. The reason for this is that the instrument that he used is essentially a giant, quadrant, and he would sit, the observer would sit, himself would sit, and he would have a plate, and he would move the plate up and down, which corresponded to a viewing angle. And then, if he had a very precise clock, he would measure when that star was in line with this meridian instrument. And the meridian instrument was set up so that it was aligned north to south. What that means is that star was as high up in the night sky as it ever was going to get. So if he could get the altitude of the star at that precise time, and he knows the time, then he gets an altitude and an azimuth. He gets the two position angles of the star. He can then very, very effectively map out the positions of stars or objects relative to each other. And his precision was quantified down to 1 arc minute, or 1/30th of a full moon. This is very important. Tycho, as it might be, as can be politely said, had a very generous opinion of himself. In this observatory with the dome that he put in because he couldn't have the instrument wiggle due to wind, so he needed something to protect the instrument from any kind of wind currents or anything of that nature, because again, it had to be extremely steady in order to make these very precise observations. On a wall, which from my understanding was a good 20 feet high or so, he put a mural of that instrument and him on that wall. Larger than life picture of himself on the wall of his observatory. Kind of give you an idea of what he thought of himself. Well, at the time, there was this big question. So, just prior to Tycho, there was this monk by the name of, I can never remember if he was an actual monk or there was this gentleman by the name of Nicholas Copernicus. And he did not like the Ptolemaic model because he did not like the idea of, or he could not reconcile how physical spheres could move in and amongst themselves. Basically, what I'm referring to are the epicycles that are needed for a geocentric or a Ptolemaic model to work. And so the idea here is that the orbits are on physical shells, moving relative to each other. The epicycle would in fact also be a physical shell, which is moving relative to the other shells, which require the shell to move within shells. Copernicus did not like this system. And also, from a philosophical or theological point of view, he was more comfortable with the idea that the sun, being the brightest, most glorious object in the known universe, that should be the center of the universe, as that is representative of God. Well, he came up with his model. Unfortunately, his model and Ptolemy's model, from a predictive standpoint, which is ultimately the benchmark on how we on whether or not we reject or accept a particular model, its predictive power wasn't any better than Ptolemy's. Meaning that if you computed, all right, I want to know where Saturn is 2 months from now. You can do that computation using both of those models. They will give you an answer, and within the error bar of an observation, those two positions were indistinguishable from one another. The other issue that the Copernican model had was that he couldn't get rid of epicycles. Copernicus still also had to use epicycles. But the reason why people still paid attention to it was that it was far simpler to use, and it gave you something that Ptolemy did not, which is the relative distances from one planet to another. And if you actually look at the modern comparisons of, say, the distance of Mars relative to the distance to the Earth, it's pretty bang on. It's at least bang on to 2 decimal places. Mars and Earth are about 1.50. Mars is 1.5 times farther away than the Earth is. Now, it gets a little messy at Jupiter and very messy at Saturn, but there it is. Hence, this is the motivation for why this question really came into the forefront, is if Copernicus was just way off, if Copernicus couldn't give us anything of note or anything of value that the Ptolemaic model could give us, we wouldn't really be having that, or they wouldn't really be having this discussion. And also, again, it brought to the physical or the philosophical point of view of what is primary. Are we, as human beings, on the Earth primary, or is the sun, which Copernicus related to God, is that primary? Tycho, knowing where the wind blew and basically who buttered his bread, meaning who it was that gave him the money, didn't really want to piss off the church or the nobility. So he decided to split the difference. So again, the geocentric model, the Ptolemaic model, states that the Earth is at the center and all things revolve around the Earth. The Copernican model states that the sun is at the center of all things and that all things revolve around the sun except for the moon, which revolves around the Earth. Tycho was like, no, how about this? How about everything revolves around the sun except the Earth and moon? And the sun and everything that revolves around it revolves around the Earth, and the moon also revolves around the Earth. He's like, hey, best of both worlds, baby. We could have we can get that distance information that Copernicus was worried about, and we can still keep the Earth at the center. While Tycho was a fantastic observationalist and also an accomplished mathematician, he couldn't get his model to work. And by what I mean by getting his model to work was that he could not make the observations that he had made match with the mathematical predictions of that particular model. Old metal nose. If you don't use, Clive says, if you don't use an inertial frame, but an accelerated frame such as the Earth-centered one, then you lose conservation of momentum and angular momentum. That is getting further into this than I have really had time to look into. I know that there is, at this point, I've looked into the neo-Tychonic system. I've looked into relational mechanics enough that I realize there is a momentum problem, but I haven't really sat down and figured it out well enough that I could really articulate it very well. Tycho couldn't get this model to work, so what he did was what essentially is the modern equivalent of he hired a postdoc. He hired a promising mathematician, German mathematician by the name of Johann Kepler, and he tasked Kepler with getting the model to work. And what I mean by a model is that given that construction, given the Earth is the center, the moon goes around the Earth, the sun goes around the Earth, and everything else goes around the sun, that is going to lead to predictions of where the planets will be in future times. And that has to be mathematically described. Well, as it turns out, and there's a lot of fun history, basically Tycho dies because he couldn't take a piss. Kepler has to go to war, or has to go to legal war with Tycho's family in order to get the data. But ultimately, Kepler gets a hold of the data, and he's actually free to work on it. And ultimately, what broke the Tychonic system, the reason why the Tychonic system was not adopted, was because of Mars. There was an 8 arc-minute discrepancy between the observations that Tycho had made to a precision of 1 arc-minute and the model that Tycho wanted to use. They didn't fit. Essentially, we had Kepler at his disposal had a slew of Tycho's observations of the planets, specifically Mars. He chose Mars because it is the closest, it is the fastest moving of the planets, of the outer planets. And so any sort of discrepancies between the models and observations would be seen more easily with Mars than with any other planet. And he noticed that the predicted positions of Mars on certain dates were off by as much as 8 arc minutes. This is irreconcilable. If we are to trust Tycho's observations, then this model does not work. The neo-Tychonic, or the Tychonic model, does not work, which ultimately led to Kepler rejecting the Tychonic model and essentially adopting a variant of the Copernican model. As we know, Kepler came up with this, used this data to come up with his 3 laws of planetary motion. One, that all planets or objects orbiting around, well, to him, I believe it was just planets, all planets revolve around the sun in elliptical orbits, where a circular orbit is but a special case of an ellipse. You have planets will sweep out equal areas in equal times. This is essentially a conservation of angular momentum consequence. What that effectively means is that as a planet is further away from its star, or from the sun, it moves slower. If it's closer to the star, it moves faster. And then finally, his harmonic law, where he was able to determine in ratio that the period squared, if you took the period of a particular planet with relation to the period of the Earth around the sun, and you squared it, that is equal to the distance of that planet away from the sun divided by the distance of the Earth cubed. Now, Kepler had no absolute values. He did not know what the absolute distance between the Earth and the sun was. So that was the best that he could do, was that he came up with this relationship, this p squared equals a cubed relationship, which ultimately got flushed out with Newton and Newton's theory of gravity, but that is a subject that I'm not going to go into today. I have talked about this in the past in lectures where that is a fantastic proof of how taking something... So Kepler, empirical laws. There is no physical motivation for why the planets do what Kepler is assigning or describing them to do. Kepler did not assign a physical motivation for why orbits had to be ellipses, or why a planet will move in equal areas or over equal areas in equal times, or the harmonic law. There was no physical underpinning. This was entirely empirical. This is basically him looking at the data and fitting mathematical relationships to that data to create a predictive model that would allow him, or anyone else, to figure out where Mars would be at a future time, or past time. You can go back either one. And yes, I'm effectively addicted to these now. Thanks, whoever did that to me. I think it was one of my physics recitations. I'll blame them. Anyway, Newton comes along, Newton's law of gravity. With Newton's law of gravity, we now have physical reason or physical motivation for why the planets behave this way. And given first principles of gravity, Newton was able to effectively derive those same relationships without even looking at data. He said that these relationships naturally follow from two masses attracting each other as described by the universal law of gravity. The planets weren't motivated? I don't know if I understand that your question there, Judy. So, that is my long-winded sort of introduction to this whole thing. And actually, this goes into a slight aside. So I put out a short maybe last week or so, basically asking people, when it comes to talking about the solar system and the motivation behind whether the Earth or the Sun is at the center of the solar system, we really need to stop talking about dark matter or dark energy. Because they really have nothing to do with whether or not the Earth is at the center of the universe or not. One could make the argument that they do, but on the face of it, they don't. Dark matter is so... our understanding of dark matter at this point is that dark matter is so dispersed at such a small spatial scale that effectively cancels itself out. It affects the dynamics of the solar system not at all. In terms of dark energy adding an expansion to the universe, again, on such a small spatial scale, dark energy is not... It would be nonsensical to consider the effects of dark energy given the precision of our instruments. They don't matter. Now, where they do matter is when you start looking into asking questions of how we got here, how we ultimately got to our solar system, which is the ultimate cosmological problem. So, again, probably not making that any, probably not being clear. Let me look at this another way. Something that this text does, something the author does quite often, is that he refers to things as the Copernican model. In the flat Earth debate, I often hear folks talk about the heliocentric model. I would like that to stop. Because, well, first off, it's not the Copernican model. If you're talking about the model of the solar system, if you want to be very precise, right now it's a modified Nice model of how the solar system came into being and how it is currently evolving. If you want to be less precise, then you would say that it is a Keplerian model. Because, and again, I want to wait on this, there is a distinct difference between Copernicus's model of the solar system and Kepler's model of the solar system, even though both have the sun at the centers. And these are deep philosophical differences. I would say physical differences, but at this point, with both of those gentlemen, they weren't really putting forward any kind of physical motivations for things. It was all mainly either logical or mathematically motivated reasons for this. So if you want to talk about dark matter, if you want to talk about dark energy, then what you want to talk about, what you are talking about, is the overall cosmology. And that cosmology at the moment is the Big Bang Theory. You can still have a geocentric, I suppose, in a way, the solar system could be geocentric or heliocentric within a different cosmology. A steady state cosmology would also kind of sort of support a geocentric or heliocentric. Not really, because again, that goes into how did the universe come into being, but more specifically, how did galaxies form, and then ultimately how do stars form, and then ultimately how do planets form. All of that, you can argue, is baked into the Big Bang Theory. But not really, because all of that can also be explained in the steady state theory. I know this might seem like a pedantic argument, and I'm probably not expressing myself very well. But what I find to be very important is that when we just use words like the Big Bang Theory or the heliocentric model, we are ignoring a huge area of astronomy, which Flat Earth or Aether community has not even begun to address. And part of that is going to be reflected into this. The Aether community and Flat Earthers have posited no reason for how the sun came into being. They have not posited any sort of mechanism as to how the Earth came into being. They have posited no reason for how the galaxy came into being. To really develop a system of how the universe looks and how the universe should behave, these are fundamental questions that need answers. It was fine for Kepler to empirically look at things and develop his laws of planetary motion. But until Newton came along and provided a physical explanation for why the planets should move in that way, Kepler's model only applied to the solar system. He could not describe how, say, two galaxies revolved around each other, or how two stars revolved around each other. So, when we think about all of this, the reason why I am pushing back against these terms now is because I want this conversation to get bigger. I want the flat earth, and I want the Aether cosmologists to stop looking at things so narrowly. If you really want to approach this in a way that is scientific, then you need to stop ignoring all of the other things that have to come into being or have to work in order for the Aether winds to come into existence, or the Earth to be the center of the universe. As I've asked before, if we do truly live in a geocentric universe, if the neotychonic system is the correct prescription, that has an implication as to what the universe looked like prior to the Earth's existence. Because if you are stating that the Earth is the center of the universe, absolutely, then what was the center of the universe prior to the Earth's existence? Unless you are stating that the universe began when the Earth began. Then the question becomes, how did the Earth get here? And if you have, or if you are not invoking a divine mechanism, then that is a very fundamental question that you need to at least address. All right, getting off my soapbox. Yes, steady state was essentially the major nail in its coffin was the CMB. Also, I think it violated the second law of thermodynamics, because steady state, from my understanding, required the creation of matter, mass energy over time. Not a whole lot, but it did require it. Anyway, let's get into the TYCHOS model. The enigmas of the TYCHOS model. Our sun has a binary companion. Some find the motion of a binary companion of the sun highly exotic. Not the word I would use, but okay. But it would actually be far more sensible to ask why our sun would lack a binary companion. We know today that the vast majority, quite possibly all of the visible stars in our sky, have local orbits intersecting with the orbits of one or more smaller companions around a common barycenter. The notion the Earth is a rare exception to this rule, perhaps even the only exception, should set off alarm bells of any rational person. The TYCHOS model does away with this glaring aberration, exhaustively substantiates that Mars is the obvious binary companion of the Sun, and that it regularly transits in the middle of Earth's PVP orbit. Again, I haven't looked into the model, so I'm not entirely certain what the hell PVP stands for. Again, this is all first blush. This is, I'm going to be doing in-depth dives on all of these, and particularly the model itself. The later accounts for the Earth's clockwise equinoctial precession in the simplest manner imaginable. Okay, so a couple things here. Binary companion. I do not believe the author knows what this term means from an astronomical context. When an astronomer says that a star has a binary companion, that means that the companion is stellar. That means that the one star has another star, and those two stars are orbiting around a common center of mass. While there may be instances where this is not the case, it is generally not common practice to refer to planets as companions to stars. So it is nonsensical to say that the Mars is the obvious binary companion to the Sun, because, again, planets are not binary companions. Now, he states, we know today that the vast majority of the visible stars in our sky have local orbits intersecting with the orbits of one or more smaller companions around a common barycenter. Again, I think this is a problem of terminology. If you are saying that the vast majority of visible stars have exoplanets, then yes, that is what current astronomy states, is that every star that you see in the night sky has or has had one or more planets going around them. Now let's talk about binary companions. If you're talking about binary companions in the astronomical sense, then actually only a little over half of all stars are in binary or multiple systems, meaning that you have two or more stars orbiting around a common center of mass. The Earth, or the Sun rather, is one of the 49% that do not seem to have a stellar companion. What's up, nerd pedantic? Alert. Howdy. Sirius is a binary star. Clive, you will not be disappointed. Sirius is coming into play. Howdy, science. So this first part doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's almost nonsensical, because again, we are lacking, and maybe he defines these things within the book itself. This book is close to 300 or is a little bit over 300 pages long. Maybe he defines these before, but from an astronomical point of view, it doesn't make sense to say that Mars is the binary companion of the Sun because, yeah, particularly in a neotychonic system, doesn't everything... What is Jupiter? If Mars is the binary companion, binary meaning 2, then what is Jupiter? Jupiter being far more massive than Mars. So, if he means something orbiting around a star, then the statement, the vast majority of the visible stars in our sky having a companion, is accurate. The notion that the Sun is a rare exception to this rule, if you are saying that a companion can be planetary, then no one is saying that the Sun is the exception. Astronomers state that there are planets orbiting around the Sun. Again, this seems to be nonsensical to me. Either we're talking about a stellar companion or we're talking about a planetary companion. This enigma seems to conflate the two and seems to be creating a problem that doesn't actually exist. Only Mercury and Venus have no moons. That is correct. Now, we expect that to be under the modified Neeson model. When you form terrestrial planets, there is no expectation for a moon to form. The terrestrial planet is simply not massive enough for a terrestrial planet to form a companion. Because what we believe now is that moons such as Io, Europa, Ganymede, Titan, so forth, they formed from an accretion disk that surrounded the protoplanets of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. The terrestrial planets were not large enough to form such a robust accretion disk such that those types of moons could form. Now one asks the question, you can flip this question. Then why does the Earth have a moon? Why does Mars have moons? Well, Mars is easily explainable. Mars has 2 moons, Phobos and Deimos. They are captured asteroids. There's nothing mysterious about this. They have the same chemical characteristics of asteroids which we find in the asteroid belt. They are irregular in shape. And from a dynamical standpoint, essentially they got nudged out of their initial orbits by Jupiter or something else, came into the inner part of the solar system, and then through probably successive passes by Mars's gravitational field brought them into its gravitational control, and put them into orbit. Phobos's orbit is actually degrading, and over the course of, I think, about 100,000 or so years, it will actually smash into Mars. These planets were in fact not formed with Mars. They were captured asteroids. The moon is a more exotic case. We believe that the Earth sustained a collision with a Mars-sized object, which we are now, for reasons, calling Thera, and that this Mars-sized object hit at just the right angle to blow off a considerable amount of mantle material from the Earth. The rest of the Earth managed to survive and stay in a spherical shape and basically coalesce into a smaller world. That material that was blasted off did not have sufficient escape velocity to escape Earth. That formed an accretion disk, or something similar to an accretion disk, from which the moon then formed. This explains a number of different enigmas, as it were, in the compositions of both the Earth and the moon. Now, the fact that the Earth got slammed into by a large body is not an exception exactly. Venus, for example, is flipped. Venus does not rotate in a prograde way. It rotates, if you look down on its north pole, it does not rotate in a counterclockwise direction. It rotates in a clockwise direction. It appears to have been flipped. The best explanation we have for this is it got hit by something really big that tipped its ass over tea kettle. Mercury. Mercury has a overlarge iron core and is significantly smaller than Venus and the Earth. Again, the reason for this, we suspect, is a collision. Is that something of a significant size slammed into Mercury, plowed off its mantle when it was basically differentiated, meaning that its iron had coalesced or fallen down into its center as a core. Most of that mantle got stripped away, but unlike the Earth, where that material stuck around and formed a companion, that material more than likely fell into the sun. There is some argument that even Mars may have been hit by something rather large, which would explain why it is actually about half the size, linear size, as the Earth. So the idea of the moon coming from a collision is not preposterous. Getting back to number 2, only Mercury and Venus have no moons. As stated in the Wikipedia entry on natural satellites, no moon is known to have sub-satellites. Not exactly certain what that has to do with anything. In the TYCHOS model, although it is worth stating that there is at least one example of an asteroid having a moon. So one could imagine that if that asteroid got captured by something big like Jupiter, you could have a moon of a captured asteroid. Anyway. But again, no idea how this relates in the context. And if I keep going slowly, I'm going to be here all night. Oh well, we'll be here all night. In the TYCHOS model, Venus and Mercury are moonless simply because they are moons of the sun and not the planets. Okay? And not planets. So again, there seems to be a problem with terminology. What do you mean by moon? Because we define planet in the simplest way as something that is orbiting around the sun. So apparently that is not what you are defining it as. Again, you might define these terms later in the book itself, or earlier in the book, but who knows. This should come as no surprise. Mercury and Venus rotate around their axes at jogging pace. I don't know what that means. I don't know if those numbers are accurate. Not saying they aren't, but I don't know those numbers. Similar to our moon, and completely unlike planets, except, for example, Jupiter and Saturn rotate at 43,000 kilometers per hour and 35,000 kilometers per hour, respectively. I give you props for using metric. However, again, when we are talking about the rotation of bodies, using a linear velocity isn't appropriate. It should be angular. Tell me how fast they revolve or rotate in days. So, for example, if you're stating that, and again, this is where things again get confusing. He's stating that some orbit of the moon, some motion of the moon, is similar to that of Mercury and Venus. If you're talking about a day, that is just wrong. I don't know where these numbers are coming from. If you're talking about the rotational spin of Mercury, the rotational spin of Mercury is, I always get these flipped, but I believe it's around 56 days. Venus, it's around 230 days. For the moon, it's 30 days. These are not anywhere close to each other. So again, I don't know how this is an enigma that needs to be solved. And again, we can explain all of these things with the NICE model. Mars and the Sun exhibit 79-year cycles locked in a 2-to-1 ratio. I looked into this. It's close to a 2-to-1 ratio, but it's not exact. And the fact that Mars and the Sun are locked in any kind of, or nearly locked into a integer ratio is not surprising. It is not an enigma within the NICE model. This is simply gravitational locking. We see it all over the place. We see it with our moon. We see it with Jupiter's moons. We see it with Saturn's moons. This is all over the place. Planetary retrograde motions contradict the laws of perspective. Heliocentrists' explanation for our planet's periodic and irregular retrograde motions, a phenomenon that has puzzled astronomers for millennia, is directly contradicted by the most basic laws of perspective. If retrograde motions were caused by speed differentials between the Earth and the other planets producing a parallactic effect or parallax effect, then the amount of a planet's retrograde motion in relation to the firmament should be greater the closer to Earth it is. Instead, the exact opposite is observed. This is, as far as I understand the meaning of these words, this is wrong. The size of the retrograde motion of Mars is greater than the size of the retrograde motion of Jupiter, which is in turn greater than the size of the retrograde motion of Saturn, and so forth. It is very possible that I am misunderstanding what this author is stating, because again, it does seem as if there is some terminology usage. Terminology uses that, or there does seem to be some confusion in terminology. The author is scientifically illiterate, not much point in wasting time on his work. The reason why I am dealing with this, Clive, is because this seems to be gaining traction within the Aether community. And so I want to address it promptly, and I want to address it thoroughly. So, yeah, that is the reason why I'm doing it. And I think it is very, very important to do so. So, yeah. Now, all right. Number 5. Sirius A and Sirius B are proportionally identical to Sun and Mars. This issue is more important than it might seem at first glance, and to offhandedly dismiss it as happenstance is not an acceptable argument in reasoned scientific discourse. In terms of size, the proportion between the Sun and Mars is practically identical to the proportion between Sirius A and Sirius B. Moreover, Sirius AB is arguably a companion system to our Sun. The idea is not new. Over the last decades, it has been put forth by several independent research groups, supported by a host of compelling facts. The TYCHOS model makes it possible to reasonably envision the two binary systems, Sun and Mars, and Sirius A and B, as a double-double system, of which there are other well-documented examples in the universe. Yes, there are many examples of a double-double. Binaries are multiple systems, and now a multiple system, again, as defined by astronomy, are 3 or more stars that are in orbit around a common center of mass. We know that these orbits will arrange themselves in a hierarchical way. So, it is common among 3 stars for you to have 2 stars that are very close to each other and another star which is orbiting around that close binary. The Alpha Centauri system is a great example of this. There are when you talk about 4-star systems, a very common configuration is 2 stars that are in what we call a close binary, meaning that they are close together and have a very short orbital period. They are moving around each other, and then they move around on a longer baseline. Because of the complexities of n-body gravitational interactions, that is why you find these types of systems. There isn't a lot of stable configurations under which massive bodies can orbit around each other in a stable way over long time frames. Or what I mean by is having orbits that are the same in their characteristics over long periods. I did? Hierarchical? I probably just fucked that up. No problem, Swiss Audits. Howdy. So yes, so there are systems like this. However, again, the pushback that the Sun and Mars are a binary companion, from a terminology standpoint, that makes no sense. And B, from a physical standpoint, that also makes no sense, because if you want to consider our system to be a binary, it would have to be Mars, or it would have to be the Sun and Jupiter. But yeah, that's not the case. I know very little about the dynamics of the Sirius A and B system. So I don't even know whether or not the orbital periods and distances between Sirius A and B are anywhere identical or similar to that of Mars going around the Sun. And again, because I haven't looked into the specifics of the model, I'm not even certain what it means for Mars to go around the Sun in his system. Argued that, moreover, Sirius A and B is arguably a companion system to our solar system. Is it a double-double system? I can assure you, no, it is not. There is no evidence to suggest that the Sun is a binary companion to any other star in the solar neighborhood. If it were a companion to any system, it would be a part of the Alpha Centauri system, seeing as that is the closest system to us. Sirius is very close, but it ranks 4th behind Barnard Star and... one moment. There we go. It ranks, 5th behind Barnard Star, Wolf 359. I think the Borg were last seen around there. And Lalande 21185. Those first three are M dwarfs, very small, very cool stars. And then finally you get to Sirius. But if we were a binary of any sort, it would be around the Alpha Centauri system, if anything. Now, one thing that that he might be referring to, or this author may be referring to, is that there may be evidence, or there might be folks out there who have claimed that the Sun is part of a moving group of which Sirius is also a part. A moving group is a collection of stars that are, roughly speaking, moving along the galaxy, in essentially the same way. These would be considered remnants of stellar open clusters from which these stars originally were formed. From my understanding, the Sun is by itself. The Sun is not a part of any known moving group. But I haven't looked into this in a while, so maybe more recent observations have shown that it is, although I just heard a colloquium the other day that effectively said no, the Sun is in fact not a part of any kind of moving group. 6, Mars lines up with the same star in only 546 days. Alan actually asked me this before. This is talking about the fact that Mars will align with some star, which I've forgotten the name of it, every 546 days. If you choose a star to align with Mars on 7 consecutive occasions, the alignment will occur after 707 days on average, but the 8th time it will take only 546 days. In the Copernican model, the Earth is believed to be displaced laterally by about 300 kilometers in the same period and still align perfectly with Mars and the chosen star. A patently absurd contention is that, which is explained away by invoking the notion of unimaginable remoteness. I'd have to verify this. I am not aware of this alignment being 7 times out of 8 taking 707 days, and then the 8th time taking 546 days. This is the first example, and there are a few, where the author simply rejects the scientific explanation. So to call this an enigma is problematic at best, dishonest at worst. This is not an enigma. We have an explanation for it. An enigma would be something we could not explain. We do have an explanation for this. Again, as to why every 8th time this period is different, I couldn't tell you because I have not verified these numbers, but I have seen evidence before that I do not think this person's numbers are accurate. He also states that the is still perfectly aligned with Mars and the chosen star. That is also, that I have checked, and no, that is not correct. If you want to say they are closely aligned with Mars, yes, that is accurate. Upon 2 successive passes of Mars to this one particular star, they are close to within a couple of arc minutes. Given astronomical precision today, that is not, but no smaller. So, on the arc second scale of things, they are not aligned with successive passes. Mars and this star are not aligned. That changes. Given our precision of measurements down to micro arc seconds, this is in no way any kind of perfect alignment. And to suggest that there is some kind of perfect aligning here is just disingenuous, because it seems to indicate to me that you are suggesting some kind of physical motivation behind it. Venus appears to rotate clockwise around its axis. Again, I don't know what this has to do with heliocentric or heliocentric geocentric, but it says in reality Venus rotates counterclockwise, just like all the other components of our solar system. This illusion of its apparent clockwise or retrograde rotation is upheld by an erroneous notion that Earth rotates around in its course of its 1.6-year synodic period. This is another case of confusion induced by the heliocentric frame of reference. This makes no sense to me. One, again, it's not an enigma. We have an explanation for why Mars's rotation is counter to everyone else's. And again, I would have to look into Chapter 8, but I am uncertain how a change in reference is going to make Venus rotate differently with respect to us as opposed to another frame of reference. So if I place the sun at the center, as we do now, apparently this causes Venus to appear to rotate in a retrograde fashion. But if I were to, say, place the Earth at the center, this is going to correct that spin, but not affect the spins of any other of the other planets. I find this exceedingly hard to believe. And as Nerd just pointed out, this says nothing about Uranus, and I don't believe he talks about Uranus in any of these 41. 8. The orbits of Venus and Mercury are coplanar with the Sun's equatorial ecliptic. Again, we have a problem with what they mean by equatorial ecliptic. Now, ecliptic, generally speaking, means the plane through which the Earth passes around the Sun. Now, they've put in equatorial. The Sun the axis of rotation of the Sun is not perpendicular to the ecliptic plane. So when he states that the Sun's polar axis is inclined to about 6 to 7% with respect to our ecliptic plane, this is still an unresolved enigma of astrophysics. That is incorrect. This can be explained through gravitational interactions between the Sun and the planets when they formed. I am not intimately familiar with the details behind it, but I can assure you that there is an explanation for them. When I do a video specifically on this, I will have better answers for you. The orbits of Venus and Mercury display the same inclination, a fact which can be verified in the TYCHOS 3D simulator. It is a less than 5-second Google search will tell you that Venus and Mercury the inclination of Venus and Mercury's orbits are in no way the same. So I don't know what they mean by Venus and Mercury are coplanar. They are not. If you're talking about absolute values Do we consider them coplanar? Yes. Given a certain amount of range, we consider all of the planets to be coplanar within our solar system because their inclinations are not drastically different from one another. But to say they lie on exactly the same plane is inaccurate. The 7-degree axial tilt of the Sun, Mars, the Moon, and the Sirius system. The TYCHOS model provides a basis for the notion that this particular 7-degree obliquity, as seen from the Earth, is shared by components of our system and the Sirius binary system due to the double-double binary configuration of the two systems. No idea what any of this... If this person is trying to state that there is an axial tilt of 7 degrees for the Sun, for Mars, for the Moon, within a single reference frame, that is inaccurate. That is simply wrong. I do not know of any plane of reference where those inclinations, those axial tilts, are in any way aligned with each other. As for the Sirius system, I don't know what this author's hang-up with the Sirius system is. They would have to explain to me why they would consider Sirius to be gravitationally bound to the Earth, or to the Earth-Sun system, whereas Alpha Centauri is not. Precession of the equinoxes and alternating north stars. The precession of the equinoxes is the observed annual eastward drift of the entire firmament as observed and documented since antiquity. To explain the phenomenon, heliocentrists have resorted to the nonsensical lunisolar hypothesis, which has the Earth wobbling in the opposite direction of its axial rotation. No credible mechanism has been proposed for such an unphysical notion, and recent research has roundly disproved it, leaving Copernican astronomy without a shred of explanation for this massively important phenomenon. Citation needed. This is simply wrong. There is a credible mechanism for that would explain the precession of the equinoxes. As I go into the video for 10 in more detail, I will explain that mechanism with more clarity. But to state that there is none is inaccurate. To say that this is nonsensical is untrue. Again, it's simply rejecting this is not an enigma. This is simply the author rejecting the explanation that that current science has for it. And as for, again, the recent research that has disproved it, scientific citation needed. The solar day is longer than the sidereal day, but the solar year is shorter than the sidereal year. Again, this is a problem with essentially definition. The reason why the solar day and the sidereal day are different is because of the Earth's motion around the Sun. As for the solar year and the sidereal year, I would honestly, it's been a while since I've looked into it, but that is a different mechanism. So I would not expect there to be an enigma between why the solar year is shorter than the sidereal year. It depends on how the solar and sidereal years are defined. And I will be the first to say that the equation of time for the Sun is a pain in the ass to understand. Because what you have to understand is that we often deal with essentially a mean time. You are looking at the Sun is not going directly, how should I put this? With respect to the horizon, the Sun's motion is not linear, which one would expect with a constant clock. The Sun, because of the eccentricity of its orbit, that plays into a factor. Again, I am showing my ignorance here. I will freely admit it, but I will say that the equation of time is not a simple thing to understand. I will go on to endeavor to explain that later on. Again, but my point is here, this is not an enigma. We have an explanation for it. At least he hasn't said paradigm a million times. Yeah. The moon appears to be the central drive shaft of the solar system. Our moon's 29.22 day true mean synodic period is reflected in almost every exact integer multiples of all components of our system. Citation needed. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know almost exact integer multiples of all components of our solar system. It's an integer multiple of Io's orbit around the sun, or around Jupiter, of Miranda's orbit around Saturn. No. Granted, for those two explanations, I have not looked into it. I suppose someone can do the back of the envelope calculation and figure out what the integer multiple between 365.25 days is and 29.22 is. Is that an integer multiple? I would be very surprised if it is. Almost exact integer multiple. And again, what he's talking about is tidal locking. Tidal locking is a common phenomenon within the solar system. Not like this. Not saying that the entire solar system is in fact tidally locked with some kind of relationship of 29.22 days. So again, stating facts that are not in evidence, this does not make this an enigma for the Copernican model. This is simply not true. Remarkably, 27.3 days, the so-called Carrington number, is also the time employed by the sun to rotate around its own axis. It is not. This is also wrong. The Carrington rotation rate is around 29 days, not 27. And the sun is a differential rotator, meaning that the rotation period of the sun varies directly by latitude. So that is just wrong. The moon's oscillating 14. The moon's oscillating perigees and apogees. The moon oscillates from perigee to perigee as it transits closest to the Earth by about 14,036 kilometers, and from perigee to apogee by 42,108 kilometers. These distances reflect the Earth's annual motion of 14,036 kilometers along the PVP orbit, thus providing spectacular support to the TYCHOS model's proposed orbital speed of the Earth. Moreover, while Copernican astronomers remain clueless, the TYCHOS fully explains the existence of the moon's puzzling exogenous cycle of 54.1 years, or 3 Saurus cycles of 18.03 years, corresponding to the time needed for the Earth-Moon system to cover a distance equal to the moon's orbital diameter. I am not aware of what that cycle is. The moon's oscillating perigees and apogees the moon oscillates from perigee to perigee by 14,036 kilometers. I'm not entirely certain what that means. Does that mean that the respective perigee distances change by 14,000 kilometers? I would need to verify that. I'm not aware of this sort of thing. As for the perigee to apogee, that is explained by the fact that the moon can be explained, again, if these numbers are accurate, is explained by the fact that the moon is not traveling in a circular motion around the Earth. The moon appears to accelerate in relation to the Earth. Number 15. This acceleration is an optic illusion, which has long deceived mainstream astronomers due to their erroneous heliocentric perspective. In the TYCHOS model, the phenomenon is fully fully expected corollary of the Earth-Moon's system's snail-paced motion around the PVP orbit. The Moon appears to accelerate in relation to the Earth. Yes. Yes, it does. Because it orbits the Earth. Again, I don't know what the point here is. This is not an enigma. This is a direct consequence of the motion of explaining the motion of the Earth, motion of the Moon around the Earth. It's an orbit, therefore it must accelerate. I don't know what they mean by appears to accelerate. Now, if they're also talking about the fact that if they are not talking about acceleration in terms of the change in the velocity vector, velocity direction, if they are talking about the change in the of the magnitude or the speed of the Moon, again, that is a direct consequence of the fact that the Moon is traveling in an eccentric orbit. See back to Kepler's laws. Kepler's second law, specifically. The largest meteor showers recur at regular annual intervals. 16. The currently favored explanation of recurring meteor showers is that they are caused by our planet crossing through dust trails left behind by various comets every year at specific dates and locations, despite the fact that no comet is known to return on a yearly basis. The TYCHOS submits a much more rationally and demonstrable explanation. The annual recurrence of large meteor showers corresponds with the regularly intersecting orbital paths of the Sun and Mars. Okay. This is obviously a misconception as to how the author believes we explain the how meteor showers occur. We are not suggesting that the meteor trails are being replenished year after year after year. What we are stating is that as the comet moves in its orbit, it will leave behind material. Because of outgassing due to change of temperature as the comet approaches the Sun and then recedes from the Sun, you're going to have a certain amount of material which is blown outward from the nucleus of the comet itself. This outgassing is not regular. This outgassing is not a constant. It does not release, say, 1 kilogram of material every second. The rate of outgassing is highly variable. That will then create a density will cause density irregularities in the trail, meaning that it is not a constant stream of 1 kilometer or 1 kilogram of material every meter, but a clumpy distribution of cometary bits. These cometary bits have mass, and so they will, unless they are acted upon by an outside force, they will continue to orbit the Sun very much like the comet does. It is essentially a cometary river that is there. Now, it is also affected by stellar winds, which will also affect the density of the trail itself. This is why certain the Orionids, which at times are just phenomenal meteor showers, at times are duds, because for whatever reason, the part of that cometary river is thinner than at other times when we intersect it. This cometary path is like a ring around the Sun with a orientation, with a that's what I'm looking for. It is described by the comet's orbit. So it is replenished by the passage of that comet, but that comet does not need to go by every year to keep it where it's at. So that is a misunderstanding of how we explain meteor showers. And again, not entirely certain how this has anything to do with geocentric or heliocentric. The 405 kiloyear cycle, number 17. Never heard of this. As shown in the TYCHOS 3D simulators, all the inner bodies of the solar system, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and the Sun, with the exception of our moon, are governed by a distinct, very stable 405,500 year cycle, also identified by geologists, which makes them return to virtually the same place in the sky at the end of this period. After two such cycles, the inner bodies will obviously return to the same position, but this time they will be joined by the moon. The 811,000 year megacycle may also be the time required by our solar system and the Sirius system to revolve around each other. There is no evidence to suggest that Sirius and Sun are binary companions. I've said this again, you will have to supply evidence as to why that is the case, and also explain to me why Alpha Centauri is not a part of that system. As to these cycles, never heard of them. Not saying that they don't exist, and in actual fact, because tidal locking is a thing, I would not be surprised if there is this cycle within the within the orbits of the inner planets. This would correspond to a particular sort of orbital resonance, which again is extremely common within our own solar system, within the moons of our solar system, and within the planets of our solar system. The conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn appear to be unequal or chaotic. Hotly debated at the end of the 18th century, the great inequality is the observed fluctuation of Jupiter's and Saturn's conjunctions. According to Newton's laws, the fluctuation would have Jupiter eventually crashing into the Sun, while Saturn would be driven away into the depths of space. The puzzle was never truly solved, despite the abstruse and convoluted claims to the contrary and all the fear it engendered. The TYCHOS, however, reveals that these apparent irregular Saturn-Sun conjunctions are a perfectly natural consequence of Earth's motion around in its PVP orbit, and that our planets are not falling out of their irregular orbits anytime soon. I am not aware of this great inequality debate of the 19th century in relation to Jupiter and Saturn. Women's voting? Sure, that one I'm aware of. Jupiter and Saturn? No, not so much. I can tell you that it is not the modern consensus that Jupiter is going to crash into the Sun, nor is Saturn going to be driven into the depths of space. The Nice model effectively tells us that the solar system is stable over at least millions of years. Unfortunately, because of chaos, we are not able to reliably predict longer than that. But there certainly is no idea that the planets will fall out of their regular orbits anytime soon. So I would have to look into this with a little bit more depth to find out what they are in fact talking about. Number 19, the orbital periods of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto support TYCHOS model's tenets. Okay? The TYCHOS can demonstrate that the orbital periods of all the components of the solar system are multiples of the moon's synodic period, and therefore also exact multiples of the sun's 1 year orbital period. The orbits of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto may appear to be exceptions because their respective periods are slightly shorter than integer years, but the difference disappears when the periods are adjusted for the optical effect of Earth's progression along its PVP orbit. Sounds like a little bit of backwards engineering on that last part. Again, I'm not familiar with the PVP orbit, so I have no idea what they mean by optical effect of the Earth's progression. But that seems to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Not backwards engineering, but forcing the model to fit. Again, I haven't done this, but I highly suspect that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are, in fact, not multiples of this moon's synodic period. I would be very surprised if they were. Why Pluto? Why include Pluto? Because if you are on one side of the astronomical community, Pluto is not a planet. If you're on another side of the astronomical community, Pluto is a planet. But so is Eris, so is Mahe Mahe, so is Oumuamua. So what about those? What about those orbits? Have you tested those as well? Again, it seems to show a misunderstanding of our solar, of what our system actually states, of what the Nice model is. The equinoctial precession appears to increase exponentially. 20. The TYCHOS model provides a plain geometric explanation of this age-old, unresolved mystery. The rate of precessional increase is exponential because it is caused by two separate cumulative components: the east to west lateral displacement of the Earth in relation to the stars, and the east to west secular rotation of Earth's equinox in relation to the stars. Let's see. I thought Alderon's orbit was stable. Yeah. Hey, if a Death Star is not an outside force, then I don't know what is. Equinoctial precession appears to increase exponentially. This is news to me. I have no idea what they are referring to. 21. Mars is officially reckoned great cycle. Since the orbits of Sun and Mars are locked in a 2-to-1 ratio, it is fully expected that the great year of Mars, 50,688 solar years, would be twice the duration of the TYCHOS great year of 25,344 solar years. It is in fact officially reckoned that Mars has a great cycle of approximately 51,000 years. I don't know what they are referring to. And again, this is number 21 of the enigmas of the Copernican model. How is this an enigma of the Copernican model? You know what? I got to. I was hoping not to do. No. I'm not going to. I was going to. I wanted to with respect to time, I wanted to avoid any on the fly debunking. Again, I want to do edited videos for that. I do not know of the great cycle of Mars, mainly because I have never heard to anything referred to as that as such. Now, this might be referring to a cycle of Mars dealing with its axial tilt. Now, because Mars does not have a sizable satellite like the Moon, its axial tilt varies wildly. The axial tilt of Mars over time goes from 0 to 60 and back again. I'm not entirely sure what the time frame of that is. It may very well be 51,000 years. This is one of the arguments for why life never existed on Mars, is because the climate on Mars changes dramatically over a relatively short geologic timescale. The fact that the axial tilt of Mars and the Earth are pretty much the same right now is one of those happy coincidences. It is not. In a few thousand years, they won't be. Earth's rotation is believed to decelerate. Unaware of Earth's motion around its PVP orbit, heliocentrists are under the impression that Earth's rotation is decelerating. The TYCHOS can readily demonstrate both geometrically and mathematically that this is not the case. Using the wrong model of the solar system inevitably leads to confusion and faulty conclusions. Why you're putting that statement in now, after 22 of these things, I don't know, considering to me that's a fairly obvious last statement. Again, we have an explanation for why the Earth's rotation appears to be decelerating. And from my understanding, we have observational evidence to support that the orbital period is decelerating over long time frames. Now, we definitely have support that tells us that the Earth's rotation rate changes on the order of a few seconds, both forward and back, that the Earth's rotation can not only decelerate, but it can accelerate over short time scales because of stuff, in technical terms, stuff in the Earth's core moving around relative to each other. Therefore, the moment of inertia of the Earth is constantly in flux. One of the reasons for this is that geologists have now, or geophysicists now, believe they have found Thera, that impactor that I talked about at the top of the hour, that we now have evidence that that thing actually exists and is still a coherent object within the interior of the Earth. And this guy loves cycles. 23, the 811,000 year mega cycle. It is officially estimated that the last reversal of Earth's magnetic poles occurred roughly 800,000 years ago. The TYCHOS model submits that this event can be, or may be, related to the megacycle, i.e. the time employed by the solar system and the Sirius system to revolve around each other. What is it from Mean Girls? Stop trying to make Flick a thing. Stop trying to make the megacycle a thing. I said it before, I'll say it again. There is no evidence to support the idea that the sun and the Sirius system are gravitationally attracted to, or are gravitationally bound to each other. Also, what would that have anything to do with? Why does that have anything to do with the flipping of the magnetic poles of the Earth? And more importantly, why is this an enigma of the Copernican model? 24. The enormous disparity between the pole reversals of the Sun and the Earth. The magnetic pole reversals occur every 11.5 years on average, whereas the last reversal of the Earth's poles is estimated to have occurred about 781,000 years ago. As viewed under the TYCHOS paradigm, this would seem to suggest that the pole reversals of the Sun and the Earth are commensurate with their respective orbital speeds. 107,226 kilometers per hour and 1.6 kilometers per hour. How does the Earth have an orbital speed if it's the center of the universe? Random question. The enormous disparity between the pole reversals of the Sun and the Earth. Again, this is in a chapter known as the Enigmas of the Heliocentric Model. Copernican model. The reason for the enormous disparity between the pole reversals of the Sun and the Earth is because the Sun and the Earth are different bodies. The mechanisms behind those pole reversals are different. They are in no way related to each other. This is an excellent example of someone trying to force causation into a perceived correlation. Assuming that these pole reversals do correlate with the orbital speeds that he has stated, that doesn't mean that there is any sort of causality associated to it. But bottom line, the Sun and the Earth are two separate bodies, The mechanisms behind which their magnetic fields are generated are different. And so therefore the mechanism behind why the pole reversals happen is also different. And so to expect that the periods of those pole reversals would be the same or would be correlated to one another is nonsensical. 25. The analemma and the need for the equation of time. Yeah, this one they simply reject the accepted scientific or the astronomical explanation for why the analemma exists and the need for the equation of time. As I've stated before, this is not something I've looked into in a very long time, and when I have, I honestly, it's complicated for me. It is not something that comes naturally to me to explain, and so this gives me a great reason for me to revisit the analemma and the equation of time. 26. The mysterious 137 number. See it, Dr. Nimrod? Hopefully you had a good... hopefully you enjoyed this. Gloom in the corner crying. It was... Yeah, all right. Gleam, whatever. Anyway, number 26. The mysterious 137 number. I did not know 137 was mysterious. In the TYCHOS model, for every diurnal rotation of the Earth, the Sun moves by a distance corresponding to 1/137th of the circumference of the Earth's PVP orbit. Sounds like a U problem. Physicists call this peculiar 1:137 ratio the fine structure constant alpha, and many think it pervades the entire structure of our universe at both micro and macro levels. As a mere speculation, one could envision the Sun as playing the role of the electron as it orbits around the nucleus, represented by a central magnetic field delineated by Earth's PVP orbit. Moreover, the observed minuscule variation of alpha is compatible to the daily motion of the Earth. I believe I have heard of a fine structure constant. It has something to do with the standard model, and that is as far as I can say, or as far as I'm going to go with that. I am not familiar with a 1:137th ratio of any kind. Is that the fine structure constant? It could very well be. I don't know. I am very ignorant of this. But again, this might seem pedantic, but this is in a chapter entitled The Enigmas of the Copernican Model. This relates to the Copernican model? Not at all. This has to do entirely with the TYCHOS model. And you are equating this 1/137th ratio as being tied, that your model, or that the TYCHOS model has, the Copernican model does not, as far as I'm aware. You're saying that this ratio that arises from the TYCHOS model is in some way attached to some kind of physical ratio that underlies basic physics. And then you go into, admittedly, you do call it mere speculation. You then go on to say that the Sun is somehow playing the role of an electron orbiting around the nucleus of a central magnetic field delineated by the Earth's PVP orbit, which I'm beginning to suspect that this is not a true geocentric system. I suspect it is very much like Ptolemy's, in that the center is empty and that the Earth actually is slightly off that center. That's my supposition based on the context of these, of what I'm reading. But again, this shouldn't be here. Now, one might ask, Professor Parks, why are you keep going back to that? Well, the reason why I keep going back to that is the chapter is entitled 41 Enigmas Solved by the TYCHOS. That would suggest that there are a number of problems that within the Copernican model, there are a number of problems within the Copernican model, namely 41. That isn't the case. This is misrepresenting the truth. A number of these enigmas have nothing to do with the Copernican model at all. And then an additional number, the author has decided that they simply do not like the explanation provided. So this is a tactic to make it appear as if the Copernican model, as they state, is more problematic than it actually is. Fine structure constant is very close to 1/137th. People did speculate why it might be exactly this number, but it looks like a coincidence. After all, if all dimensionless numbers were not close to rationals with small denominators and numerators, then that would be surprising. All right. 27. Stellar aberration as ultimate proof of Earth's rotation around the Sun. Although long falsified by Airy's failure, Bradley's theory of stellar aberration is still regarded as proof of Earth's rotation around the Sun. TYCHOS demonstrates that Bradley's abstruse theory was accepted simply because the observed looping motions of the stars were incompatible with the heliocentric paradigm. I think someone mentioned that the word paradigm was going to be used at some point, or hadn't been used. Well, here you go. You can check that off your bingo list. Appearance of looping motions is the result of the trochoidal path around which earthly observers rotate annually. All right. I stated this to Eric, and I will freely admit this. Eric asked me if I could provide a textbook which went more in depth as to the observations of stellar aberration and so forth. And I couldn't give him one. None of those books behind me on physics or astronomy actually even talk about it. And the reason for this is that stellar aberration is too small an effect to be of any relevance to anyone but astrometrists, and it is not considered the ultimate proof of Earth's revolution around the Sun. Therefore, I know almost nothing about stellar aberration, because I never learned it, because it was not interesting. It has no astrophysical consequences that are of interest, and it is not large enough for me to have to worry about, given the precision of telescope pointing. If you want ultimate proof of Earth's revolution, that would in fact be stellar parallax. But hey, each their own. This is simply misrepresenting the significance of stellar aberration within the astronomical community. 28. The purportedly anomalous precession of Mercury's perihelion. This non-existent anomaly in Mercury's perihelion was, quote, resolved by Einstein with his theory of general relativity, making him a world celebrity overnight. However, the TYCHOS model shows that the seemingly 43 arcsecond annual discrepancy in Mercury's perihelion is the corollary of falsely assuming the Earth revolves around Mercury's orbit. Once the heliocentric model is replaced with the TYCHOS model, which has the Sun, Mercury, Venus trio revolving around the Earth, the purported anomaly simply disappears. There can be no simpler falsification of Einstein's theory. This non-existent anomaly, I don't know how you could state that, since from an observational point of view, that anomaly exists. We observe it to be 43 arc seconds. This is thus explained by general relativity. So I believe from context, you are saying it is non-existent because your explanation states that this anomaly doesn't actually appear. I think this is, to me, this seems like a little bit of double dealing. Effectively, you are explaining an observational effect based on a model or or some kind of physical understanding. The truth is, we observe a 43 arc second discrepancy in the perihelion of Mercury. Current science, relativity explains why that 43 arc second precession, observed precession, exists. You are claiming that that observed 43 arc second precession can actually be explained because of our position relative to Mercury. And if you actually looked at or took a preferred reference position, then that discrepancy wouldn't actually be there anymore. Again, this is not an enigma. We have an explanation for this 40-second discrepancy, which you are simply rejecting for reasons. Now, you are saying that you can replace this with the TYCHOS model. If that is the case, then we will see when I do a video on this on your chapter 22. Chapter 29. Remote stars are clearly visible to the naked eye. Copernican astronomers estimate the distance to stars based on what they believe to be Earth's lateral displacement over a period of 6 months orbiting the Sun. That is an oversimplification of the trigonometric parallax method, and it is by far not the only distance method that astronomers employ. In the TYCHOS, however, the Earth does not orbit the Sun and only moves laterally by 7,018 kilometers in this same period. The ratio between these two parameters is 42,633 to 1, meaning that all the stars are many thousands times closer to us than the absurdly inflated official estimates. Okay. All right. This is a quite plausible scenario, considering the ease with which stars thousands of light years away can be seen. For example, Sirius and Jupiter subtend roughly the same angular diameter in the sky, but the former is believed to be 88,000 times more remote than the latter. If this was true, Sirius would be 8,834 times larger than the Sun. Likewise, we are expected to believe that the angular diameter of Vega, a first magnitude star, is 622,000 times smaller than the Sun's instead of 16 times smaller as reckoned by Tycho Brahe due to atmospheric distortions which affect the stars only. Whew, okay, there's a lot to dissect here. Let's start off with, again, the author is simply disregarding the idea that stars can be very far away for reasons that are not articulated. For some reason, this author cannot believe that stars are thousands of light years away. And they do so, as with many people I've spoken to on this, without reason. They simply do not think this is the case. And I'm still waiting for it. They say that, it goes on to say, for example, Sirius and Jupiter subtend roughly the same angular diameter in the sky. This is in no way accurate. Jupiter has an angular size of around 32 arc seconds. 32 30 arc seconds, give or take. Sirius, depending on Sirius's, I actually don't know off the top of my head if Sirius has been resolved interferometrically. I don't know exactly what its angular size is, but I can tell you from an observational perspective, from a visual, looking at it through a telescope, either with your eye or with a CCD camera, that it is nowhere even close to 30 arc seconds in size. And it is actually smaller than the distortion of the atmosphere would allow you to see. There is this thing called atmospheric distortion or seeing. This is a phenomenon which, because of the refractive properties of the atmosphere and the fact that the atmosphere is turbulent, stars will appear to bloom out. They will no longer appear to be point sources, but they will have a certain size that is commensurate to the amount of variability within the atmosphere. That is a very simple way of describing a more complex. That is very simplistic in how I put that. Seeing changes depending on sight and weather. So, for example, here we cannot distinguish anything smaller on a good day than around 2 arc seconds. The atmosphere will cause everything that is point-like in the sky to blur out to a size of 2 arc seconds on the best of days. On other days, it blurs out to 3 or 4 arc seconds, and that's usually typical, maybe even 5. The author is an Italian film producer? Wow. That's awesome. Simon Shack. His name is Simon Shack, and he's an Italian film producer. Well, explains the whole Italian motto in the very beginning. So, so that first statement is just wrong. It's just simply wrong. The Sirius has a much smaller angular diameter in the sky than Jupiter does. Therefore, the size, the linear size of Sirius with relation to the sun is nonsense. I don't understand this statement. Likewise, we are expected to believe the actual angular diameter of Vega, a first magnitude star. Angular diameter is 622,000 times smaller than the sun's, instead of 16 times smaller as reckoned by Tycho Brahe, due to atmospheric distortions that affect stars only. Again, you are simply rejecting modern science without reason. You just simply are rejecting it. You put forward no rationale as to why the angular diameter of Vega could, in fact, be that much smaller than the sun. Again, why we are going back to Tycho for this, I'm not entirely certain, because while Tycho was an amazing visual eye observer, we have far exceeded the precision of his observations with more modern instruments. As for atmospheric distortions affecting stars only, that it goes into optics. The fact that they do affect objects that appear to be disks, such as planets and the sun. Atmospheric distortions will affect the apparent sizes of those, but not nearly to the same extent to something that would appear point-like on a detector. And that has to do with how the light from a point source spreads out and passes through our atmosphere, as opposed to an extended source like a planet. This is not an enigma. This is explained through optics. The perceived speed of our solar system in relation to the stars. Our entire solar system is estimated to move at approximately 19.45 kilometers per second in relation to the stars, or vice versa. Once more, the TYCHOS has a plain, simple explanation for this generally accepted parameter. 19.4 kilometers per second is tantamount to 69,840 kilometers per hour. Okay. If we divide 69,840 by 42,633, the TYCHOS reduction factor, we obtain 1.638 kilometers per hour. Okay. I guess that's keeping with the sig figs, although almost exactly the orbital speed of Earth proposed by the TYCHOS. In fact, the evidence available for observational data is overwhelmingly supportive of Earth's 1.6 kilometers per hour orbital motion. Citation needed. Presumably that citation is chapter 23. So I don't know what the TYCHOS reduction factor is. So, okay. Don't know what's going on here. Now this 19.4 kilometer per second in relation to the stars. In relation to what stars? I'm not entirely certain what you're referring to here. I know that the motion of the sun around the galactic center is around 220 kilometers per second. So, but if you're talking about the local environment, I suppose that would have to be an average. I would have to look that up. But again, not an enigma. We have an explanation for this. You can choose to accept it or not. Really, you could have split this up into another chapter, which would have said validations of TYCHOS with observed data, or observational validation of the TYCHOS model. This would fit more into that chapter if there is one of those. Not to say that this is in fact validation, but that is more thematically what you are doing than stating an enigma. Ludicrous speeds! Yes. What about those huge scopes way up high in Chile? Not sure what you mean by that. I would love to go see, I would love to go to Cerro Chololo at some point and see the VLTI. It's on my bucket list. The 31, the Michelson-Morley experiments. The numerous interferometer experiments attempting to detect the supposed hypersonic motion of Earth are said to have produced null results or to have failed entirely, thus confirming Einstein's theories. However, on close scrutiny, the velocities recorded by most of these experiments, especially those of Dayton Miller, though small, are certainly not null, and actually support Earth's 1.6 kilometer per hour orbital speed as proposed by the TYCHOS. Moreover, Michelson is even quoted as saying that he thought of the possibility that the solar system as a whole might have moved in the opposite direction of the Earth. This is, of course, precisely what happens in the TYCHOS model as Earth slowly revolves in the opposite direction of all the other components of the system. So this is confirmation that the TYCHOS model is not a true geocentric model. It, very much like Ptolemy, has placed the Earth outside the center of the universe for reasons that I do not yet that are not clear to me. Hopefully they make some kind of justification for why that is, other than it makes the model work. This is this is at the 2-hour mark, so I doubt that anyone will, other than the folks who are watching right now, will have. Wow, Phil. I'm really not liking this Simon Shack guy then. So, I will say this about the Michelson-Morley. I think I'm going to clip this so that more people will see it. So this leads to, I've heard this argument before, that that when we state that the Michelson-Morley experiment resulted in a null result, that we are wrong, and even the paper itself tells us that we are wrong. This is a misunderstanding of the term null result. On the face of it, one might think that a null result is a result of absolute zero, that Michelson-Morley did not record any shift at all between the Earth and any sort of shift, fringe shift in the instrument. That is not what we mean by a null result. As I and many others have frequently tried to emphasize, when we do science, one of the most important aspects of scientific reporting and interpretation involves error. A null result is when your measured result is not statistically significantly larger than the error of that result. If I say that the Earth is moving at 1.6, if I use some kind of mechanism and my reading tells me that the Earth is moving with relation to the center of the center of the universe at 1.6 kilometers per hour, and yet my error is plus or minus 2 kilometers per hour, that is a null result. That is interpreted by any honest scientist as stating you have not observed any motion at all, because that is not statistically significant. It's actually smaller than your error bar. That means that you cannot say to even 66% certainty that that number is correct. That is what is meant by a null result. Yes, a fringe measurement was detected, but given the error bars of the instrument, that detection was statistically insignificant. Thus, it cannot be trusted, it cannot be used, it's a null result. As opposed to how the velocities, how they relate to how Michelson-Morley supports the TYCHOS model, I couldn't tell you. I am not familiar with the experiments of Dayton Miller. It would have been nice if they would have referenced those experiments, because from my understanding, when people have attempted to do the Michelson-Morley experiment and they have found results contrary to, shall we say, modern science, those results have been inconsistent with each other. They have shown some kind of fringe result or fringe movement, but the magnitude of the fringe movement is not consistent within one experiment to another, which is vital if you want to have one experiment supporting the results of the others. The Michelson-Morley was 10,000 times more sensitive than it needed to be. Yes, that is not to say that that was its error bars. It was basically saying that its error bars were such that with the predicted motion of the ether, the predicted motion of the Earth around the sun, then the measurement would be 10 times larger than the error bars that they were using for it. And I thought it was actually far more sensitive than that. I thought it was 1 in 1 billion, but I could be completely wrong about that. Simon Shack, I feel fortunate to have no academic credentials to speak of. Fantastic. Ye old 32. Yep, we're getting there, folks. We're getting almost done ish. 32. Thank you all for sticking around if you've been here from the get-go. 32. The existence of negative and zero stellar parallax. Just parroting with Austin. Apparently he's going to be debating Professor Dave, that shouldn't be a train wreck at all. I don't know if it's happened or is happening. It's going to be on the quartering, from my understanding. Not a channel that I have a lot of esteem for, but who knows. 32. The existence of negative and zero stellar parallax. If our planet were orbiting the sun as Copernicans claim, the parallax between nearby stars and remote stars would be invariably positive. Negative parallax would occur only if the Earth reversed direction, something no sane person has ever proposed. Correct. The problem is that only 25% of observed stellar parallaxes are positive, while 25% are negative and 50% are zero. This incontrovertible and highly Copernical fact is perfectly compatible with the TYCHOS model's geometry. Note that the TYCHOS model does not negate the vast amount of stellar parallax data collected to this day. On the contrary, it provides the first time in the history of astronomy a purely logical explanation for its observed distribution into positive, negative, and zero values. Okay. Citation needed. You state that of presumably trigonometric parallax, which is different from spectroscopic parallax. Trigonometric parallax, you are stating that only 25% of known stars of these parallaxes are positive, 25 are negative, and 50 are zero. No, that is not correct at all. I don't know what database you're using. I would really love to know what database you're using. I am just now getting into the Gaia database. For those of you who are unaware, the Gaia is the successor to Hipparchus, both of which are European. Go Europe! Go ESA! They are European satellites that have done extensive trigonometric parallactic work on stars within our galaxy. Hipparchus did have a small hiccup in that its data needed to be reanalyzed because there was a systematic error in the analysis, and so in 2007 it was reformulated, and the von Neumann numbers are the ones that are considered to be canonically accurate. Hipparchus, from my understanding, had a database of 1 million or so stars. I can assure you that this 25%, 25%, 50% does not apply. I don't know what the exact percentages are, but I would put money that they are not 25, 25, and 50. But Hipparchus has been superseded by Gaia, which has looked at billions of stars. Now, I think in a short, I have admitted that I've looked into the Gaia data release, and there are a lot of negative parallaxes. In fact, there are estimated to be over 1 million stars, maybe even 1.5 million. Again, I'm just looking into this. 1.5 million stars that have negative parallaxes. Last I checked, 1.5 million is nowhere even close to 25% of 1 billion. Not even close. And as to parallaxes that are exactly zero, I would pretty much say that that number gets even smaller. Zero is one number, whereas positive and negative are an infinite number of numbers. So having half of your data sample be one number, that's amazing. That is truly mind-boggling, and it is not the case for Gaia. PVP orbit, I don't know. Once I'm done with this 41, I will actually investigate that. Hey, David, I apologize. Yes, you did email me about WW2. I apologize. I have dropped the ball on that. I have no good explanation other than I have not been well and I have been focused on my day job. But that being said, I did have time to look into it and I simply forgot to. So I very much apologize for not getting back to you on that, and I very much apologize for not responding to your email. And I hope you can accept that. I do plan on, I believe it is a documentary that you sent me that I wanted to watch. I also need to read chapter 2 and 3 of the crematorium textbook that or document that you sent me. I hope you do not feel that I do not want it to seem like I am blowing you off in any way. PVP orbit. Yeah, I will look into what PVP orbit is. So, now, and I'm going to do an entire different video on this subject, which is, PVP is Polaris to Vega back to Polaris. Oh, it's processional? Interesting. Okay. All right, I'll figure that out. All right. I'm going to do an entire video on Gaia and trigonometric parallax because, again, I have stated this, the reason for why negative parallaxes can be expected. I looked into Gaia, and essentially, I'm right, but it is more complicated. As I've stated, just in brief, yet again, this notion that trigonometric parallaxes are performed by taking an observation of a star with relation to the background stars, once on one side of the orbit and then again on the other side of the orbit, and comparing the two, is oversimplistic to being wrong. When you do trigonometric parallax, particularly from the ground, you look at that star continuously over the entire time that you can see it. If it is in the sky, you're looking at it. So you have thousands of data points to work with. What you were actually determining is not specifically a parallactic angle, but a parallactic orbit. You are looking at the ellipse that is formed by those measurements. And from that ellipse, you can then calculate the parallactic angle to the best precision possible. It is in the computation of that ellipse is where Gaia stumbles, or where these negative parallaxes come in. Now, the way Gaia does it involves the use of priors. And so it's I don't think it uses a Bayesian method, but it uses some sort of likelihood metric to determine how well a certain ellipse fits to the data. And that requires the use of what is known as a prior, or an initial guess. And from what little I've read so far, is that one of the things that can contribute to a negative parallax is getting the prior wrong. Is if you feed it a bad prior, the algorithm is going to go in a certain direction that's going to be just wrong. There's also the fact that we are just assuming a priori that these bright points in the sky are stars, single main sequence stars. That is not the case in many cases of these millions of negative parallaxes. There are a number of QSOs, of quasars, that are being observed. They are not stellar in origin. There are a number of binary companions which can affect its position, particularly at these precisions, and other things. So, as I have stated multiple times, there are explanations, and in my opinion, extremely valid explanations, for why negative parallaxes exist. And again, astronomers do not give credibility to these negative parallaxes. We realize that these parallaxes are erroneous. They are unphysical, and so therefore cannot be treated as real. So when you are attempting to use a distance to an object for whatever purpose, to say determine its age or determine whether or not it's a part of this moving group or that, or anything else related to distance, you cannot use that trigonometric value, that trigonometric parallactic value. You just can't. Also, you cannot use, and this goes back to, I think, 31 or what have you, the Michelson-Morley thing. If the error bar associated with that parallax is too large, now the rule that I tend to go by is that I am quasi-confident if the measurement is 3 times the size of the error of the measurement, which is what we call a 3 sigma event, then I will tentatively say, yes, this value can be used. This is the distance that this is the true distance of the object. This is good. We can move forward from here. I would prefer what is known as a 5 sigma event, where the error bar is 5 times smaller than the magnitude of the measurement itself. So, example, I measure a parallactic angle of 5 arcseconds, plus or minus 1 arcsecond. In that case, or even greater, I am very confident that what I am seeing, the measurement that I am getting, is in fact correct. This is the true value, or at least this is a true enough value that I can move forward with, move forward answering other questions. No one in our community will give any sort of credence to measurements that are less than 3 sigma. If we read a paper and we look at that this distance is no better than a 2 sigma event, we're going to look at it and be like, okay, that's interesting, I guess, but we're not going to trust it. It's not going to be something we're going to hang our hat on. Now, if someone else comes along and supports that through better measurements, or there seems to be a confluence of measurements, all of them with kind of poor error, but they all seem to be pointing in the same general direction, then that gives us more confidence. But no one will state them as good values. I don't know how else to really describe that. Number 33, the stars appear to be moving in 2 opposite streams. In relation to time, I'm not going to reread this. Essentially, he's talking about 2 astronomers, Kapteyn, whom I'm familiar with, and Escalongan, Ernest Escalongan. Both of them, but apparently they have observed stars moving in streams in 2 opposite directions. I don't know specifically what this author is referring to, but what I can tell you is that we do see stars that are moving in streams. There seems to be stars that are moving along the same direction in space that occupy a large angular size in space. There is literally a stream of stars moving as a group through space. The most prominent of which are the Magellanic streams. And the reason why those exist is because of the fact that the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is tidally ripping the small and large Magellanic clouds to bits. And when it does so, it does it as a stream. It stretches it out like spaghetti or like taffy. So having these 2 astronomers seeing this effect does not surprise me. This is a known phenomenon in space, but I don't know exactly what he is talking about specifically. He then goes on to say that that TYCHOS can explain this. Well, so can the Copernican model. 34, and this is where the spoilers come in. Sorry that it took me so long to get to this, but this I found to be very enlightening, because I hadn't put it together until now. 34, the fallacy of elliptical planetary orbits and variable orbital speeds. Kepler himself admitted his theories of elliptical orbits and variable speeds could not be derived from observational data. They were simply mathematical devices necessary to make the heliocentric model work and compensate for the optical illusion of dissymmetry. In the TYCHOS model, all celestial bodies move in circular orbits and at circular speeds. Since they all revolve directly or indirectly around a barycenter occupied by Earth's PVP orbit, they will alternatively find themselves on either side of our planet, giving rise to the hypothesis of elliptical orbits and variable speeds. Moreover, Kepler and Newton's theories are mutually contradictory, a fact that is largely ignored. This was my fucking eureka moment. So, this is a Ptolemaic model. This is going back to the Aristotelian worldview that celestial objects only move in perfect circles and they only move in uniform speed. The speeds of celestial bodies do not change. Aristotle believed that and spherical objects, ironically enough, he believed that to be the definition of perfection. I believe that was in physics. He states that in physics. Ptolemy tried to make that work. He tried to have the Earth at the center of the universe and have circular orbits of planets going around the Earth and the Sun going around the Earth at uniform speeds. He could not get it to work. His predictions were off. The first thing that he did, I believe was the first thing he did, the first concession that he had to make was to move the Earth out of the center of the universe. He had to place it off center by, I think that is referred to as the deferent. There is no physical reason for it. He literally did it to, quote, make the Ptolemaic model, quote, work. Because that is the only way that you can make uniform speed appear to be variable. As I've stated with Kepler's second law, Kepler's second law tells us that the speeds of the planets are not uniform. As a planet moves further away from the sun, it will slow in its orbital speed, and as it moves closer to the sun, it will move faster in its orbital speed. That is essentially Kepler's second law. So, this model, TYCHOS' model, is going back all the way back to Ptolemy. If I have ever given credence to the Neo-Tychonic system, that was only with respect, or with only to the understanding of relational mechanics. It was only with the understanding that the orbits of everything are exactly, their ellipticities, their inclinations, were all the same, all that we measure currently. It's just simply moving our point of reference to the Earth as opposed to the Sun. This model is complete bullshit. We have never, and I am very confident in stating that, we do not have a working model of the solar system where the orbits are perfect circles moving at uniform speed. Kepler couldn't get it to work. Tycho, that was Tycho's model. I guess that's why he calls this TYCHOS. That was Tycho's model. Kepler could not get it to work. Tycho invalidated the idea of this system working with Tycho's own observations. Now, I will say, in all honesty, I don't know if Tycho's system had this 1.6 or 14,000 kilometer offset, but it used circular motions, or it used circular orbits, it used uniform motion. It does not work. It has never been shown to work. So the idea that this model uses circular orbits at constant speeds proves to me that this model is not accurate. Kepler admitted his theories of elliptical orbits and variable speeds could not be derived from observational data. No, he admitted he could not derive them from observational data. More specifically, he emphasized that this was an empirical finding, that he was not putting forward a physical mechanism for why the orbits were elliptical or why the speeds of the planets varied with time. That was Newton. Newton was the one who gave the physical underpinnings. Now, this Kepler and Newton's theories are mutually contradictory. Citation needed. Apparently, it's in chapter 26. They are not mutually contradictory because Newton's laws, the law of gravitation, can literally derive Kepler's laws of planetary motion. And not only that, it can generalize Kepler's harmonic law. Before, Kepler's harmonic law, which was the period of a planet with respect to, say, the Earth or another planet, that quantity squared is equal to the ratio of the planet's distance away from the sun, specifically the semi-major axis of that planet's orbit, with relation to the semi-major axis of the Earth or some other planet, that quantity cubed. That is Kepler's formulation. Newton, on the other hand, and like I said, that formulation is only applicable to the solar system. Newton, on the other hand, was able to find that actually that ratio hides something very, very interesting. It hides the gravitational constant, and more interestingly, it hides the masses of the objects involved. So now, not only can this system, this equation, be generalized to anything orbiting around anything else, it is a cornerstone method on determining the mass of an object. One of the best, or one of the most common labs that we do in astronomy is determining the mass of Jupiter based on its moons. And this is something that if you have a good telescope, or modestly good telescope, and if you have a CCD camera, this is something I wanted to do myself, but just haven't had the time. But since now I'm the director, I've got all the time I want. Is if you take observations of the moons of Jupiter as they go backwards and forwards, and you determine the period of that orbit, simply determining the amount of time it takes for to go from one side to the other. You know the plate scale of your camera, therefore you know the angular size of the orbit. You can then use Newton's revision of Kepler's third law to determine the mass of Jupiter, which is roughly around 316 times the mass of the Earth. Because you do have to make one fairly crucial assumption, and that is the mass of Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto are essentially nothing in comparison to the mass of the moon, which you can verify for yourself, given just ratio the mass of Io to Jupiter and see how big that is. It's not very big. So you can make that claim. So when I read this, any sort of veracity that I was going to give to this model went completely out the window. This model is nonsense. If it is adhering to the idea that celestial bodies can only orbit in circular motion, if celestial bodies can only move in uniform circular motion, that is simply not physical. We have observations which do not allow, or which show that that cannot and does not work. Howdy, Maya. Yes, 2 hours, actually 2.5 hour stream. And I really do need to find time to cut these things into smaller, more digestible bits. Almost done, kind of, sort of. 35. The angular momentum problem. On the false assumption that the sun needs 240 million years to complete a single orbit, heliocentrists estimate its angular momentum to be 0.3% of the total angular momentum of the solar system. This is an embarrassing situation for them since it completely violates Newtonian physics. However, in the TYCHOS model, the sun has a local orbit of 365.25 days and a full cycle of 23,344 years. When these parameters are used in the equation, the observed angular momentum of the sun is within the limits of plausibility. You're going to have to define what limits of plausibility are, considering your limits of plausibility on, say, stellar distances and mine are considerably different. So, in terms of the sun moving around the galaxy in 240 million years, that has to do with the angular momentum of the sun galactic center system, or galactic system. I don't know where this 0.3% of the total angular momentum of the solar system comes from. Most of astronomers will tell you, if you look at the angular momentum budget of the solar system, the vast majority of it, I would actually say probably 99.7% of the total angular momentum is in the sun. Most of the rest of that is in Jupiter. And then everything else is essentially negligible in terms of the angular momentum budget. So this person is conflating two different angular momentum budgets. The number, I don't think, is accurate in any way whatsoever. And so that is why they believe it is an embarrassing situation, because it violates Newtonian physics. It's because they don't understand what they are talking about. So, peculiar motions of Barnard star. 36. Back in, I think it was the 70s, an astronomer, a very well-respected astronomer by the name of Van de Kamp, looked at Barnard star. Barnard star, as I showed earlier, is the second closest star to us outside of the Alpha Centauri system. It is the fastest moving, it is the star with the largest proper motion, meaning that it is moving with respect to the other stars faster than any other star moving with respect to any other star. So all of the stars are slowly moving relative to each other. Barnard star is moving the fastest of all of those various motions. Van de Kamp noticed that there is an oscillation in the right ascension and declination position of Barnard star over time. This means that it's wobbling as it's moving through space. Newton's first law basically tells us that the object an object that is not undergoing an unbalanced force should move in a straight line. Therefore, Van de Kamp explained, or hypothesized, that there was a planet going around Barnard star which was causing it to wobble because of the gravitational interaction of the planet. It was causing it to wobble as it moved through space. The problem with this is that no one other than Van de Kamp saw this. Barnard star is a very notable star. Van de Kamp, at the time, is a very notable astronomer. So when Van de Kamp said he found the first exoplanet around Barnard star, boy howdy, you can betcha that astronomers everywhere dropped what the fuck they were doing and looked at Barnard star. Not one of them corroborated Van de Kamp's observations of Barnard's oscillation. To everyone else, Barnard's star moves in a straight line through space. There is no oscillation. So the explanation is that Van de Kamp himself never got on board with is that for whatever reason, I believe he was using a telescope at Lowell Observatory, for whatever reason, there was some systematic vibration within his setup that was causing the oscillation. From my understanding, and of course I haven't looked into this in a while, I don't believe that there is a precise reason for his observations, but I can say they have not been corroborated by anybody. So this enigma isn't there. So apparently TYCHOS can explain it, whatever. The minuscule retrograde periods of Eros under the heliocentric model retrograde motions are said to be the result of Earth overtaking its fellow planets. Within this rationale, the closer the overtaken body is, the more it should be seen retrograding. However, the retrograde period of the asteroid Eros, which passes much closer to Earth than Mars or Venus, is so short as it is barely perceptible. I am ignorant of I am ignorant of Eros's orbit, so I could not tell you whether or not retrograde periods have been observed or whether or not the absence has been explained. 36. Cigar-shaped cometary orbits. 38, sorry. Cigar-shaped cometary orbits. It was Isaac Newton who followed the theory of extremely elongated elliptical cometary orbits based on a mistaken identity. In 1680, Eros made a close approach to Earth shortly before the appearance of Halley's Comet in another area of the sky. Newton thought that they were the same object, making a sharp U-turn, leading him to envision the orbit as cigar-shaped. Unfortunately, astronomers have been holding on to this unphysical notion ever since. Blah, 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 blah. So, cigar-shaped translates to high eccentricity orbit. Now, I have never heard it claimed that Newton was the father of a highly eccentric orbit. Actually, S, who may still be watching, actually knows more about this this particular bit of history because, as it turns out, Edmund Halley is also the first actuary in existence. He is the first person to be an actuary. So, if you didn't know, now you do. Edmund Halley, the first actuary in history. Edmund Halley was the one who pushed Newton to publish his Principia, primarily because of the fact that Newton's theories could explain Halley's motion, Halley's Comet's motion, and he wanted to be able to use it as validation for Halley's Comet. Another interesting little tidbit. Now, blah, 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 blah. Where was I going with this? So he states that as to a mistaken Eros mistakenly being observed as Halley's Comet, I don't know anything about that. I've never heard of this, but I can't say that this isn't accurate either. But what I can say is that there are so many other observations of objects that validate the existence of highly elliptical and even hyperbolic orbits that this one statement does not matter. Okay, if he did make an erroneous observation of Eros as opposed to and claim that it was and think that it was Halley, great, but that does not nullify the existence of highly elliptical orbits at all, because it doesn't explain all of the other observations. Again, unfortunately, astronomers have been holding to this unphysical notion ever since. A, why is it unphysical? And two, we haven't been just saying, oh yeah, highly eccentric orbits exist and comets should have highly eccentric orbits because, well, Halley. We've measured them. and we have determined the eccentricities of them. So we know that they exist, and we know why they exist. So, yeah, misrepresenting, not accepting current scientific explanation, and misrepresenting what current science is. Again, not an enigma of the Copernican orbit. The chaotic periodicity of Halley's Comet. Mainstream astronomers believe Halley's Comet behaves chaotically, returning at intervals between 73 and 79 years, and dream up fantastical gravitational and non-gravitational forces to justify it. The TYCHOS CD simulator. Maya, if you're still on the call, maybe that might be something you want to play with on one of your Sunday shows with Weasel. Is see if you could find where this simulator is and have a go at it. Anyway, this simulator apparently shows instead that Halley's Comet has a regular period of 75.7 years, but becomes visible on multiple occasions during each transit, deluding comet hunters and leading them to rebaptize it many times over. The simulator sheds light on the passages of Comet Halley over the past 2 millennia, blah, 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 blah. How do you spell that? That's a good one. So, all right. All right, let me see if I can put it over here. TYCHO SIUM3D. I have no idea how that's supposed to be pronounced. Tychosium? All right. Again, this is simply a denial of mainstream explanations. Awesome. This is a denial of a mainstream explanation. It is not an enigma. The fact, or I do not know the specifics of Halley's orbit, but what I can tell you is that it is a short period comet, at least in terms of astronomically speaking. We arbitrarily define a short period comet as one that has an orbit of 100 years or less, and then a long period comet as one that is 100 years greater. The implication is short period comets more than likely originated from the Kuiper Belt. Long period comets originated from the Oort cloud. I can easily see that the orbit of a short period comet would be disrupted to a minor extent to give you a period change between 73 to 79 years, simply due to the dynamics, the movement of masses within our solar system, and the gravitational interactions that Halley's Comet has as it passes through the solar system. In terms of non-gravitational forces, what I'm hoping they are referring to is a non-gravitational force with respect to comets is essentially explosive outgassing. And yes, my inner 5-year-old is having problems handling that term. What this means is that a comet is essentially an irregular mass of dirt, metal, and ice. In that irregular mass of dirt, metal, and ice are pockets of gas that have been frozen over. As the nucleus of the comet approaches the sun, obviously it's going to get hotter. The closer it is to a burning fire, the hotter it gets. I know, duh. As it gets warmer, the nucleus is the ice of the nucleus is going to sublimate, creating a coma. As it gets closer in, effects like radiation pressure and drag are going to cause the tails to appear. If you have a pocket of gas where the surface of that pocket sublimates off and the gas is now is released, that gas is under pressure. And so it's going to explode outward. It is very much analogous to a thruster. It is going to create an unbalanced force on the comet, and it's going to adjust its orbit. This is what is referred to as a non-grav, a non-gravitational force which alters its motion. Non-gravs are the reason why Oumuamua appears to have changed its orbit as it moved around the sun. If you want a fun little a fun little example of how even respected astronomers can go crazy, look up Dr. Ari Loeb, Loeb, and Oumuamua. Dr. Loeb, who was the department chair of physics at Harvard, believes and still does believe that the comet Oumuamua, which we know to be interstellar in origin, is not a comet. It is in fact a spaceship. He doesn't believe the evidence points in that direction. He believes the evidence proves that Oumuamua is a spaceship. Because one of the reasons for it is because the comet is on a non-Keplerian, or does not have a had a non-Keplerian orbit, meaning that its orbit was not dictated solely by gravity. It effectively changed its direction. The reason for that is because of these outgassing events that occur with comets, which is widely known. Again, this is not an enigma. And oh boy, I said that when I read that that this author did not believe in, only believes celestial bodies moved in constant speeds, circular orbits, where I lost all, when I knew that this model was incorrect, there was no possibility that this model was correct. I now have 40. We can't feel the Earth rotating or orbiting. Seriously? This was written in 2023? We're still using this? This is still an argument that is being made. The orthodox explanation as to why we cannot sense the Earth's axial rotation is quite correct. The Earth rotates at a constant speed, and its rate of rotation is a mere 0.0007 revolutions per minute, which is far too little to produce a perceptible centrifugal force. Huzzah! On the other hand, this heliocentric claim that the Earth is hurtling around the Sun at a breakneck speed of 107,226 kilometers per hour, 90 times the speed of sound, has no scientific or experimental foundation whatsoever. As proposed by the TYCHOS model, our actual baryocentric orbital speed is only 1.6 kilometers per hour, which is comfortably below the threshold of human sensory perception. Oumuamua is a spaceship. This is known. All right, Maya. Okay. I guess you and Ari would have a lot to talk about. I find it interesting. Let's look at what this person has done here. When talking about the rotation speed, which in his model the Earth rotates, so he has to come up with he has to come up with an explanation for why we don't feel the Earth rotating. Because in his model, we do rotate. He talks about the speed of the Earth's rotation in angular units, 0.0007 revolutions per minute. Far too small to perceptible centrifugal force. But then, when he talks about the part of the discrepancy between the Copernican model and his model, the orbit of the Earth around the Sun, he no longer holds to angular speed. He reverts back to the age-old linear speed, 90 times the speed of sound. Curiosity, I don't know this, but curiously, I would really like to know what the angular speed of the Earth is around the Sun. Why are we not comparing apples to apples? The other issue here is that we do not notice speed. And again, this has been explained many times. We do not perceive speed. We perceive acceleration. So if you are drugged, put in the back of a car, in the trunk of a car, and you woke up and the car was moving, there would be no way for you to determine how fast the car was moving. Is the car moving at 50 miles an hour? Or 50 kilometers per hour? Is it moving at 100 kilometers per hour? There is no way for you to know that based on your experience. What you can notice is whether or not the car is going to accelerate rapidly or decelerate rapidly. We have gone over this many times. As for the centrifugal force, again, he talks about a perceptible centrifugal force when talking about the rotation, which he agrees with us on. But when it comes to the heliocentric, when it comes to the Earth moving around the Sun, he no longer talks about a perceptible centrifugal force. I would be curious to know what that centrifugal force is. Again, this is a blatant this is, again, not an enigma, and it is one of the most egregious forms of misrepresentation that I have seen in this. All right, and finally, 41. Dark matter and dark energy are entirely spurious concepts. He talks about how he doesn't believe dark energy and dark matter are a thing because, again, reasons. He doesn't articulate why. He just says that they are, they cannot possibly exist. He also claims that they are sacred, or they, I don't know, what is it? I don't know, something about sacred Newtonian or Einsteinian laws. If I see anyone say Einsteinian, I immediately know that their knowledge on this subject is limited. No one refers to this, to relativity as Einsteinian mechanics or Einsteinian physics. Very few people that I know of refer to classical mechanics as Newtonian dynamics or physics. It drives me, it irks me more than I would like it to that these terms continue to be used. In terms of dark matter and dark energy, I come back to what I talked about at the very beginning of this, which is this has nothing to do with the model of the solar system. The dark matter is not considered within the Nice model at all. Dark energy is not considered within the Nice model at all. So if we want to keep calling things, it's not the heliocentric model. It's the Nice model. More specifically, I think it's the modified Nice model. That is the current accepted model of how the solar system came into being, how it moves, and how it evolves. It is a heliocentric model, but it is a very specific one. So if you want to have conversations about these sorts of things, let's start getting the terminology correct. It certainly isn't a Copernican model. Again, if anything, it's a Keplerian model. Because Copernicus held to the belief of perfect circles and uniform speeds, which we know from repeated observations do not work, are not compatible with observed reality. The Nice model can exist within different cosmologies. Steady state, Big Bang, for example. It is in those contexts that dark matter and dark energy need to be talked about. And only within these concepts. I often find it conflated when they say, when a flat earther or a science skeptic says the heliocentric model, somehow that also means the Big Bang theory. I know, again, this might seem semantic or pedantic, but they are different. They are meaningfully different. They are not connected in any real way. You're talking about the Big Bang theory, and also galactic theory, on how galaxies form and move and evolve. That requires the use of dark matter and dark energy. But if we're simply talking about the solar system, they are not concepts that need to be brought into the conversation, because modern science does not believe that they are concepts relevant to the motions of planets going around the sun. So yeah. I often refer to Newtonian mechanics as opposed to relativistic mechanics. Fair enough. I suppose I was a bit premature in stating that no one says Newtonian mechanics. I certainly don't. I don't remember the last time a physicist referred to it as Newtonian mechanics, but in my memory, I do remember someone doing that. So, but I have never heard of Einsteinian mechanics. Which I have kind of gone off at length about, and I can still go off at length about. To me, the reason why I find calling it Einsteinian mechanics or Einsteinian physics, the reason why that's problematic is that it points to a cult of personality, which I think is a problem within Flat Earth, within science skepticism. That they hold to these singular individuals, and they hold these singular individuals up as their authorities, as the people that know what they are talking about and should be deferred to. And then they accuse us of holding on to that same cult of personality where, Einstein is the guy we hold up as our authority, or Neil deGrasse Tyson is another one of our priests, or what have you. That is not how modern science operates. Modern science actually does quite the opposite. And there is, I think, a credible argument within education theory that we need to stop actually highlighting the individuals who have come up with these theories and concentrate more simply on the science itself. Because yes, Einstein came up with special and general relativity. And he also contributed to the evolution of those theories when he was alive. But there has been a phenomenal amount of work done on this field by people since Einstein. And just simply to place all of relativity onto Einstein's shoulders does a great disservice to all of the men and women who have contributed their expertise to this field of study and have broadened it and refined it to what it is now. So that is why I have such a problem with the term Einsteinian mechanics, is that it feeds into this idea that there is this one mouthpiece upon which we all must adhere, to whom we must all listen to, as if Einstein had tablets on a mountain. It's not how science works. Now, yes, it is good to give credit to the originators of the ideas. However, I think again, well, it is good, but from an educational context, is it beneficial? In the sense that does it do more harm than good? In that, one of the problems that I think is that science skeptics have, flat earthers, anti-evolutionists, anti-vaxxers, that sort of thing, is that they seem to believe that science is sent down on high from certain individuals, and that we all just simply abide by them as commandments. I don't know why, but I've got Moses stuck in my head. Whereas, in actual fact, the way that science works... the way that science works is collaborative. It is an evolution of information passing from one person to another and evolving through that process. Clive, you strongly disagree with that point of view. Interesting, why? So I'm getting from you that you think that it is vital or very important to actually credit the original scientists who are the people behind things like the Big Bang Theory, behind relativity, things of that nature, evolution, that sort of thing. That's the other thing, is that I've always referred to it as Darwinian evolution. I don't know whether or not do biologists actually refer to it as Darwinian? Yes, Maya. So that it's very easy when you are talking about a cult of personality, defining things as a cult of personality. It is easy to contextualize it as the opinion of someone, and therefore you can disregard it as such, as opposed to something that is an ongoing process of enlightenment, of an ongoing process of scientific process. Now, we have reached the 3-hour mark, and so I am planning on, and I am done with the 41 enigmas of the Copernican model as explained by or espoused by Simon Schacht. For those of you who are not here at the beginning, which I think is most of you, what I am planning on doing is I am transitioning over to OBS, and I wanted to basically test out things to make sure that I have the audio visual settings right and I know how to transition between things. But I didn't want to just do that. I wanted to have something, some kind of content to bring out. And so a friend of mine, Eric, sent me along this book, the TYCHOS Model, which is something like the geoaxial, I don't know. It's basically a geocentric, but not quite geocentric model. And so I had read the 41, and so I wanted to give you my quick as in 3 hours, take on those 41 subjects. And I do plan on doing a video series on them. I don't know if I'm going to do a video series on one video per, but I will definitely be doing a little bit more deeper dives on some of these, because some of these enigmas I'm not entirely certain what they're referring to. Clive says, I don't care what idiots think. We know how science works. Sometimes, such as Einstein, such as Einstein made absolutely revolutionary contributions and should be recognized and credited appropriately. No, I agree. Einstein should be recognized for what he did. Einstein was. It cannot be understated the impact that Einstein has had to physics and to cosmology. And it isn't about what idiots think. It's about, obviously you know how science works. I know how science works. But students who are coming up, they don't know how science works until it is taught to them, until they are told how science works. And so that's the point I'm trying to make, is that when we are doing this, when we are teaching students how science works, relying or giving special attention to individuals as being the creators of these may not be the best way to go about it. I'm not saying that we should never credit them, but what I am saying is that it may be detrimental if we were to phrase this or present science as in some way as evolving or progressing through the achievements of strict individuals, as opposed to having flames of inspiration provided by individuals, and then those flames burning into large fires from continual work by other scientists. Oddly enough, I kind of feel this way, or have felt this way about civil rights movements. Again, I'm a white dude, so what do I know about the civil rights movement? But it's always made me feel uncomfortable that we have placed such emphasis on MLK. Not that it is not deserved. MLK, truly revolutionary individual. His influence to the civil rights movement cannot be understated. But I think this may not be apples to apples. The problem I have with how should I phrase this? Because of how MLK has been emphasized to me as being sort of the civil rights movement, and the way that our education system has approached this, it was only much later in life that I learned about any really other civil rights leaders, like Malcolm X, for example. And as I'm saying this, I realize the solution to this is that our education system very much sucks in this regard, and that when we teach the history of this movement, that we need to highlight more people than just simply MLK. But I think that and I know they're not the same, in that scientific progression and the progression of civil rights are not completely analogous, but I think there is a similarity there, in that a lot of the movement of science, a lot of the progression of science, and a lot of the movement of societal change comes down to the day-to-day work of the people doing it. That this is still a collaborative event, or a collaborative exercise. That science cannot progress, that societal change cannot progress, unless without the society or the community continually working and improving thoughts, ideas, and so forth. So it's different. It's dangerous to put one person in the forefront of a movement like that. It just makes them a target personality and for the movement, and personally and for the movement. That is true, and obviously for MLK, it made him a target. Malcolm X also made him a target. And what was I going to say about that? The other problem I have with it is that sort of thing, is that it can lead to deification. Now, oddly enough, I see this with the example that immediately comes to mind is Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee in the South is damn near a fucking god. Stonewall Jackson is damn near a fucking god. I mean, these guys are almost deified. And when it comes to looking at Lee specifically as a general, because really that's what we need to look at him as. Outside of that, yeah. Yes, he had the, and I know this is way off topic, but just to wrap this, just kind of to wrap this up, is that, you know, from a Southern perspective, it might be thought that Lee is one of the greatest military minds in history because of what he did in the Civil War. And from an objective standpoint, that's not even close to being accurate. And to a certain extent, Grant was a far better general than Lee ever was. And it was through Lee's, and it was through two blunders that Lee made that may have actually accelerated the downfall of the South. Now, I do not believe that the Confederacy could have won that war, but the outcome could have been slightly different, or actually rather significantly different than if it did. Lee should not have invaded the North at all. He should have led to a war of attrition, the same that George Washington did in the Revolutionary War. But again, this is neither the... I don't really want to get into that too terribly much. But what my point of view is on this is if we highlight a single individual, there is the possibility that that individual the importance of that individual could be overstated, and the character of that individual could be not quite deified. I don't think anyone is deifying Einstein or deifying MLK like they do here in the South when it comes to Robert E. Lee. But it certainly leads to it can lead to the idea that these people were larger than what they actually were, objectively speaking. And so that is my case for why I believe that as a science educator, I need to do a better job at presenting how of not hanging certain phenomenon onto certain people, because I do mention Hipparchus a lot. I mention Kepler a lot. I mention Einstein a lot. And I don't know if that moving forward is really the way that I want to do things. And so now I'm just kind of rambling. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Now we get the test to see whether or not I can do an outro and actually end the stream correctly. So hold on to your hats. See if I can do that. But anyway, I am Professor Parks, PhD, and I make content on astronomy, science skepticism, and mental health. If you like that sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications, because I am one chaotic sumbitch, and I do not post regularly. I plan on changing that, but it is an ongoing fight, and I am certainly not close to having a regular schedule of posting. So hit that bell if you want to be notified as to when I'm going live like this. If you would like to help out the observatory here, please consider becoming a Patreon. The Patreon link is in the description. All monies from my Patreon account go to supporting the observatory here, either through paying for odds and ends like cables or lights or anything like that, all the way up to we bought a planetary camera using Patreon money. If you'd like to help me out financially, please consider becoming a channel member of my channel, or super chats or anything like that. All of that money goes into my grubby little hands so that I can justify putting aside the time from my day job for doing this. I really like doing this, but you know, money helps. Anyway, so with that being said, let's do this. Thank you all again for being here. And for those of you who are going to watch this on Memorex, thank you all for watching. Peace out and clear skies.